Today I'll show you how to create a simple real-time chat application using Blazor Server with SignalR in .NET 5. So let's get coding. Create a new project in Visual Studio. So open up Visual Studio, create a new project. This is going to be a Blazor Server application, but if you can't find it in here in the recent project templates, obviously search for it in the templates. You should have it. And then give it a name. I'm just going to call it Chatty. And then the project directory will be the one that I chose. Okay. So this is it, and then hit next, and then in the target framework I'm choosing .NET 5 because this is what I'm using to demonstrate, to make this tutorial, and then click create. Okay, so as we're here, the next thing to do is to add the SignalR NuGet package, and if we right click on the dependencies, so this is the project, right click on the dependencies, manage NuGet packages, just make sure that the package source is nuget.org, and then in the browse we need to type in microsoft.aspnetcore.signalr.client. Don't worry, I'll link you up in the description with this package. Latest stable version is 5.0.10 at the time of recording this video, and click install, accept the licenses, and we're good to go. Okay, following, we need to set up the chat hub. So right click on your project and add a new folder called hubs. This is gonna hold the hubs, obviously, and in our case we're gonna create a brand new class that's gonna be our hub called chat hub. Really simply, chat hub, and that's it. This is going to inherit from the hub class, and it's not going to know about it, so we're just going to press Control dot to import the necessary framework, which is SignalR. And then in here we're going to create a method called sendMessage, and this is going to be an asynchronous task because it's not going to return anything. So public async sendMessage, and keep a hold of this name because we're going to need it later on in the tutorial. And this is going to take, obviously this is going to be a task. This is going to take a string, a user. For the purposes of this video, we're not going to do any identity. We're not going to implement any identity into this chat application, but we're just going to pretend that the user has got a string that's a unique identifier, for instance, but that's going to be their username. Okay, and then the second parameter is the message. So user and the message, those are the two arguments that this method takes. And then in here, we're going to await on clients dot all dot send async. So we're calling this method with the following arguments. The first one is the string, so that's receive message. This is the name of the method that we want to access inside SignalR at the client level, and then user and then message. So obviously we're gonna pass in these two arguments. So again, this is a name that we're giving, and you'll see why this is important to keep a hold of this name, obviously, because we're going to implement a method that has got the same name as this one inside our chat widget. So stick around for that. Following, we'll need to set up a Startup.cs class for SignalR. So if you save this, and obviously save the project as well, it's really important before running the app. Please make sure that you save the project because the package might be uninstalled for some reason. If you don't save, the package might be uninstalled. So if we go into the Startup.cs and scroll down to configure services method, and in here, what we want to do is add response compression. So the way we do that is if we come in here, this is the last line in this method, and we hit a break line, and then we do services dot add response compression. Right, and I'm going to explain in a moment what this method does. Open and close parentheses, and then inside here we need to define some options. Options, you can call them options or OBTS. It's sort of like a standard. Okay, and then we need to define them, right? So OPTS dot MIME types. Okay, and then this one, don't worry, in a second I'll explain it as well. Response compression defaults, and this is not going to be recognized, so we need to import using Microsoft ASP.NET Core response compression, so control dot yeah, and then MIME types, and then concatenate. So in here, opening close parentheses, and then a new array. Oops. So a new array, and then in here we're going to do in a string in curly braces application slash octet stream. Okay, so to recap this step really quick, what we did is went into Startup.cs, configure services, and we have added a new line to add the response compression. And basically what this is, what this does is it compresses the data that is sent between the server and the client, and to make it faster. So we need this to make the compression faster, and it's also recommended by Microsoft. And then the MIME types, this is what we're doing here. We are defining the MIME types as application slash octet stream. This is important to define so that the server and the client recognize the data type that's passed in with the payload, the payload being the data that's passed in with the request. So it's really important to do this step, right? Okay, so that's in a nutshell what is going on in there. And then the last thing to do as part of this step is to define an endpoint. And to do that, you come in between you come between this map Blazor Hub and map fallback to page, and you hit a new line there, and then you define endpoints.map hub of type chat hub, and then control dot to import the hubs folder, the hubs namespace, and then in here you give it a route of chat hub. Okay, so that's it. So we need to define this endpoint, otherwise you will not be recognized. Okay, next thing to do, really simple step, is to add a user message model. And we need to do that because we need to store the username. Inside the app on the client level, we need to store the username, we need to store their message, their date sent, and a bool flag that defines if the user is the current user. So obviously, let's create a new folder called models, because that's best practice to have a separate folder for your models or data transfer objects if you don't have if you have a database instead, but we're just going to call it models. And then in here, let's add a new class, just a simple class called UserMessage. And hit enter. And then in here, let's define a few properties, just 4 of them. So if you type in prop and then double tap, Visual Studio should create a property for you. This is going to be a string, and it's going to be called username. And then Control D to duplicate that line. And then in here, this is going to be a string still, and this is going to store the message. And then the third property, so Control D again, obviously, it's going to be a boolean, a bool flag. It's either going to be true or false, and this is current user. I'm just going to call it like this. You can call it is current user. It's up to you. And then the last one is date time. That's the data type, and then I'm going to call this date sent. Cool. That's it with this step. Oh, and by the way, if you do enjoy this video, please make sure that you hit that thumbs up button so this video can spread out to as many people as possible. I really appreciate your time. Thank you. Okay, so the last thing that we want to do is to set up the chat page, and that's going to be done in index.razor. So if we open up the pages and then head over to index.razor, In here, we're gonna strip out everything from what we've got as the default one. And then what we need to do here is add a couple of containers. So this is going to be the upper container, which is going to hold the messages feed, and the down container, which is going to hold the inputs. So the username, the message text area, as well as the send button. And obviously this particular page is going to have a code section where we're going to do our client-side logic. First thing that we need to do is to add a few using so we know that what we're working with. So I shouldn't have deleted the pages, the page directive, but I'm gonna put it back. So that's default slash, so that's a home, yeah. And then we're gonna add a using to the SignalR package, Microsoft package. Okay, so using Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.SignalR.client, yeah, and then using models because this is where the user message model that we've created is stored. That's namespace. Okay, then we are models. Then we are going to inject the navigation manager. Because we'll need that to set up the chat hub, the hub connection. So I'm gonna call this navigation manager, and then the last thing is add and implement async disposable, so we can dispose the hub connection if that's not null. Okay, following, we're going to quickly define some properties so that when we're going to start using them inside the containers, inside the UI, we won't get those ugly errors. So if you go down, add then a code block right here. Okay, so in here we've got a few properties. The first one is private hub connection, and these are more private fields rather than properties, so that's my mistake. Hub connection, and that's going to be null by default, right? We're not going to initialize that by default inside the code. We're going to initialize that on initialized async, so you'll see in a moment what I mean. Private list of user message, and this is going to be the message field, and let's call this user messages, and let's new that up with an empty list. And then private string username input, that's going to store the username that's on the screen currently, and then duplicate this, and then this is going to be the message input. Okay, and the last field that we want to do now, or almost the last one, is if the user is read-only. And you'll see why that's important in a second, because if we don't have identity, then we need to make sure that we lock the username field right after the first message is sent, so that we can ensure that the name doesn't change, so it doesn't break our application. Obviously, it's not secure. Don't take this for granted, but this is just solving the problem for the purposes of our tutorial. So this is going to be a private boolean is user read-only. And by default, this is going to be false, because when we first load the application, obviously we want them to be able to insert, to input their username. Then a public boolean, yeah, called is connected, and we define this in place by doing hub connection, by checking if the hub connection's state is hub connection state dot connected. Yeah. So this is an enum. So if the state property of the hub connection is connected, yeah, is 1, then is connected is going to be set to true. So we're going to use this property in a moment. Yeah. Following, we need to lay out the two containers. We've got two containers. One that's at the top, that's going to hold the messages feed, and it's going to show them to the user. And then the second one is going to hold the inputs, as already stated before. So username, message, as well as the send button. So this is what we're going to do now. So I'm just going to copy a snippet that I've already have, so I don't bore you with the details of typing out classes and I'm obviously going to walk through them. So this div container, that's the upper container, the messages feed, has got a class of container overflow auto, so that we can scroll up and down to see all the messages. And then we're going to add a shadow, a padding, a margin, a background of white, because we want the messages to pop out better. And we're going to add some nice shadows to the messages container. So you'll see why that's really good in a moment. And then we're going to make it rounded a bit. And then a height of 500 pixels, because I want that to be the standard. I don't want that to be, you can put that to whatever you want, but I'm just going to leave that at 500 because I don't want that to stretch over and to make the inputs not visible anymore. Yeah. Okay, and then the second container is obviously the inputs field, and this is the one that we're going to start with. So this is going to be a div container. And this is for the front end, I'm using Bootstrap. Okay, so in here, what we're going to do is add a new row to hold the inputs, and then 3 columns. First one a bit smaller, that's going to hold the username. That's not going to be used very often, but the second one is going to be probably double as large. So that's going to be the message. The third one is going to hold the button in place. Okay, so without further ado, let's go ahead and do this. So div class row. And then in here, div class call, third one 3, the second one 6. So I'm going to make this 3, so the total adds up to 12, which is the total width of the screen. Okay, so let's start with the first one. Okay, in here we're going to add an input of type text, of course, and then we don't need a name for it, nor do we need a value, because we're working with Blazor, so we know what we're doing. We're handling that separately. Okay, and the bind property is username input, which is this right here. So you see why it was important to define them at the beginning. And then I'm gonna add a class and a placeholder. So I'm just gonna copy and paste that. So a class of form control, so it looks decent, and then a placeholder of your name, and then here is where we'll use the is read only flag. So by doing read only, by accessing the read only attribute of the input HTML tag, and we're going to set that to @is user read only. Okay, so we'll define that later on in the following steps. Okay, so this is the button. Secondly, we need to add the text area. Yeah, type in text area and press tab, and then here bind to the message input. Okay, again, I'm gonna copy and paste the other properties. Again, form control, so it looks decent. Type text. Actually, we don't need a type text because this is a text area, and then the placeholder that's going to be start typing or something similar. Yeah, and then the very last one is the save button, which is obviously going to be a button of type button. And really quickly, 2 things that we need to add. So the on-click event. Yeah, this is gonna call the send, and it's not gonna find it obviously, but that's fine. We're gonna get that in a second. And then the disabled attribute needs to be defined to the is connected flag right here. Yep. If it's not connected, then disable the button. Yeah, and also we need to add a few classes, so BTM primary, so it looks okay. Okay, so that's it with the button container. What we'll do next is define the following functions inside the code block. So we'll define the onInit, on initialized async, obviously. We'll define the send function and the dispose function. So let's get to it. Okay, and this is protected. The very first one is on initialized async, so that's a protected override. And if you if you press space here, you'll be able to access the Blazor lifecycle methods that you can override. So we're going to need the oninitialized async, and it's going to generate the snippet for us, which is really, really cool. Okay, in here, we need to define our hub connection. What does that mean? We need to define it, and then we need to initialize it as well, and to start the connection. So when the page loads up, when the page first initializes, we need the connection to be already started for us to be used. Yep. So we're gonna define the nulled so far null hub connection as a new hub connection builder with URL autocomplete playing around with me, navigation manager dot to absolute URI, and then here we're gonna do the chat hub endpoint. This is the one that we have defined in Startup.cs right here, so make sure that that's the same, and also that it matches the class name as well. It doesn't have to be capitalized, it's fine, but just make sure that it's the same one as the one defined in Startup, otherwise it's not going to be able to connect you to the right place. And then call the build method on it, and that's it. So we have defined the hub connection, and the errors went away, thankfully. And then the hub connection, we do hub connection dot on. So this is where we bind onto the method that we have created inside the chat hub. So in here, we need to define the two data types that we're passing into the method on string, and then opening close parentheses and then a semicolon. So in here, we do the name of the method that we have defined inside the send message right here. So that's receive message on receive message, and then it takes two parameters. So we need to define them in here, user and message. Okay, so this is an anonymous function. Opening close parentheses. So let's go down onto the next line so it looks nice and readable. And then in here we do this. So when we receive this message, when we send this message, what do we need to do beforehand? So we need to add that message and the user, so the user and the message, to a list of messages to be able to show them on the screen, obviously. So the way we do that, we just append a new instance of user messages into our list that we've initialized at the top of this code block. So to do this, we do user messages dot add. Then in here, we need to add in a new user message instance with a username of user, with the message of message, with a current user of, and here we need to figure out if this is the current user. And this is important because we don't want to just dump out all the messages into the feed. We want to add a space between them and to make our messages be to the right and then their messages to be to the left, so that we can distinguish which ones are ours and which ones are from the other sender. Yeah. So in here we define the current user as user if the user is the same as the username input. So this is where it's important to add the is user read only flag to the username input, so that the client can't change their username midway through the process of this of sending the message. Yeah, and then the very last thing is date sent, and this is datetime.now. Okay. The next thing that we need to do inside this function is to define the state, to call the state has changed, so that we can notify Blazor that the state has changed, so we can render the message on the screen. Yeah. And then inside this on initialize async, the very last thing that we need to do is await for a start async method that we're calling on the hub connection. Yeah, so await hub connection dot start async. Yeah, so we're calling start async. So again, really quickly, we have declared the we have defined the hub connection, and then we've defined something that should happen when the hub connection calls the receive message. Yeah, and then in here we just add a new user message instance to the user messages so that we can render them on the screen. And then we call the state has changed. At the end of everything, we need to add in the await hub connection dot start async, and this is underlining it with red because we haven't got the asynchronous keyword in here, and you will see the error goes away. The next method is the send method. So this is going to be a private asynchronous task. Send. That's the name of the method that we decided to call it. Again, this is up to you how you want to call it. And then in order to send a message, let's first check if the user input as well as the message are not null or empty. Yeah. So if you type in if and then double tab, if string, so I've put an exclamation mark, so that signifies not obviously is null or empty I want to use, and we check for the username input as well as if string dot is null or empty the message input. Okay, so if these two evaluate to true, then we're good to send the message. So here is where we send the message to the hub to notify the client. We do await and then hub connection dot send async, and this is the name of the method, the name of this method right here. So send message. Okay, add the semicolon at the end. I've already done that. So send message, and then the second parameter, of course, is the username input, and then the third one is the message input. You've guessed it already. Okay. And then after we send this message, the very first message, what we want to do is set is user read only equal to true. This will make basically every time you send a message, it will make this flag set to true. You can find obviously better ways of doing this, but of course I'm just going to leave it at that because it's not hurting the application for the purposes of this tutorial. And then we need to empty out the messages input right after we send a message so that we don't have to delete the old message after we've just sent it. Yeah, so messages input dot messages input is equal to string dot empty. Cool, and that's it. Oh, and by the way, how do you like working with Blazor? Let me know in the comments below. Is it easy or not so easy to work with Blazor? Or, of course, from my tutorials or from any other developers' tutorials on YouTube. Yeah, I quite like it, actually. I find it easy sometimes to find documentations, but hey, I want to know what you guys think so we can spawn up some conversation. So let me know in the comments down below what you think. Okay, the last method is the dispose method that we want to do. So that's a public async value task dispose async. Yep, then let's fix the indentation. And then if hub connection is not null, then just dispose async on the hub connection. So await, we're going to await this method, hub connection dot dispose async. So we make sure that we dispose everything after we're finished. Okay, the very last thing that we have to do as part of this tutorial is to lay out the upper container, the messages feed. So before doing that, let's just see what we've got so far. So if you open up Package Manager console and you type in .NET watch run and hit enter, let's run the application and let's see what we've got so far so that we can work with the designs a bit. Okay, so here we've got the application up and running, so it looks really nice. Apart from something, I don't know if you spotted it, but I did. So we didn't actually give a value to this button, a name. So we're just gonna give it a name here of send. And if we press save and we come back to the application, there you go. We've got the send, the name of the button right here. Okay, so as you can see, we've got the name, the message, obviously the username, the message, and the send button. So what we want to do now is add a nice message feed right here so that we can see the messages. The cool thing is that if we want, we can copy the URL, go into a new tab, and here we are. We are working off of the same, we're working on the same instance, right? So well, on different instances, but we can see each other messages, and you'll see how that's possible in a second. So upper container, let's do that now. Let's first check if we've got any messages, and to do that we add an add sign inside that container. Type in an if, double tab, and then in here if there are user messages.any. So if there are user messages.any, and then we put a not inside in front of it, so that it means if there are no messages, then type in a paragraph to say no messages yet. Start chatting. Yeah, an incentive to just get people to just get us chat between ourselves. Yeah. Okay, and then inside here, this is a simple for each loop. So if you type in for each, double tab, for each user message in user messages. So we loop over every row inside the user messages that we've appended every time we press the send button, which is right here. So every time we press a send button, we call the send method, which is this one. Yeah, so we do this. We firstly check, obviously, if the username and message is not empty. And as we said, we're sending the message to the client level. Okay, so in here, we need to add a new row for each record that we've got in the user messages, which is for each message, obviously. So we need to add a new div container, yeah, with a class of row. And we add a margin button of 3, and this display should be flex. And you'll see why that's important in a moment, because we'll move the containers around depending on who sent them. Yeah, so inside here we add a bootstrap card. So div class card. Yeah, and then let's add a shadow as well. Okay. And then let's define the width of this card so that it's always the same width for our tutorial. So style, obviously you can do this in the Startup.cs. I'm just going to quickly chuck it in here, which is not best practice, but serves the purpose. So width is 18 rem. Yep, semicolon. And then inside here, inside this card, we need to add a header, a sort of a body, and then a footer. So the header will have the username, the body will hold the message, and then the footer will hold the date sent, so that we know when we sent or received that message, for that matter, from the other person. Okay, so first thing, div class card header. Yeah. And then the second thing is actually a UL class of list group, and then list group flush. Yeah, it's just a bit of plumbing that we need to do beforehand so that it looks decent. Just stick with me. So then a list item of class list group item. Yep. And then inside this list group item is the user message. Okay, and then we need to define the footer as well. Oh, I forgot to add the user message in the username in here. So user message, you probably already done that because it's all we need to do is add the current user in here. So sorry, not the current user, the username. Yeah, and then the last thing is to define the footer. So div class card footer, and then in here we need to add a span of class small, so that this piece of text appears as small, as it probably does in most of the chat applications. So then here user message dot date sent. So let's format this to string really quickly. HHMM. This is just so it looks more like more readable. So it's showing the month in words, and it's showing the time and the hour and the time. Okay, so let's see what we've got so far. So if you save, this is gonna start building and it's gonna reload the website. So if we go, this has already reloaded for us. If not, just press Control R. So reload the page yourself. It should be okay. And then we have no messages yet. Start chatting. So let's put a name in here. And hey there, this is my very first message. And then press save. So there you go. We've got our very first message right here. We've got the name, the username, the message, as well as the date and time nicely, the date sent, nicely formatted. So then in here in the message, let's type in another message to say, hello, second message. And then we type that in and it's right here. So we need to reload this page, obviously, to see them side by side. Okay, and then in here, let's add in Johnny and Annie. Yeah, and then in here, hey Annie, what's up? We send this. Hey, Johnny says, hey Annie, what's up? And then he says, hey Johnny. Yeah, all good. There you go. So this is how it's done. And to take this one step further, as we've already laid the foundation, so all we need to do is play around with some conditions and some classes. Let's actually move this around, these containers, so that the program can figure out which ones are our messages and which ones are the sender's messages. So to do that, we come in here and in the row. Yeah, in the div row, what we need to do is check if it's the current user. So if it's, let's go back to the application and let's see if it's the current user. What we want to do is float the container to the right, so that it signifies that that's our message. That's probably what WhatsApp is doing as well, or Messenger, or any other type of chat application. So let's do that. So open and close parentheses, obviously put an add sign before of it. So this signifies that this is a code block inside our client level. By the way, if you don't know what I mean, I've created a 7-part Blazor playlist that takes you from basics to create a recipe manager application. I'm going to link that up in this video, so please make sure to check that out. Okay, so in here, we'll need to check if user message dot current user. So if it's the current user, then add in the following class. So inside the class attribute, we're doing this. Yeah, justify content end. If it's not the current user, then don't add anything. Yeah, so this is what we're doing. And to take this one step further again, because we want this to be top notch, we need to do the same thing for the card, so that we can add some colors. So if it's the current user, then let's add a margin right of 5, obviously, because this is to the right. And also before doing that, let's add a class called color green. And this doesn't mean anything, this class doesn't exist. But if we head over to site.cs and scroll down, we can actually add that class in, so we can make the container be green. So that's a nice color for our own messages. Yeah, so I've already got a code for this color. So we can set the background color to this shade. You can set it to whatever you want, but I like this shade quite much. Okay, so let's see what we've got so far. obviously refresh your pages. So Johnny, hey there, Annie. Yeah, and there you go. We've got the message where this is Johnny. We've got the message on the right hand side where this is someone else. It's not even got a name yet. So Annie, if I type that in correctly, yeah, Annie, hey Johnny. Yep. So as you can see, Annie's going to send a message on Annie's page. This is going to show on the right hand side. On Johnny's page, it's going to show in on the left hand side. So the very last thing that I would like to do is, instead of seeing my own name, because I know my own name already, let's make this so that it shows as you. Yeah, and then for Annie, this is going to show as Johnny. And also let's make this green as well, because it doesn't look right. Okay, so in here, instead of showing the username, let's actually first let's make a code block right here, and to say if UserMessage.currentUser, then do type in you. Otherwise, do the type in the user message and take the @ out. And also, on the list group, we need to on the list group item specifically, here we can add the color green, so the background color green, by checking if the user message, not the current user, again, this is the same check, and if it's the current user, then add the color green. Otherwise, don't add anything. Save this and let's reload the apps to see how this is going. Okay, so in here, Johnny, hey there, Annie, yeah, and then in here, hello Johnny, yeah, so then we send you that message. No messages yet disappeared. We've got this on the right hand side for Johnny, we've got this on the left hand side for Annie. This is saying you. I'm sending a message to Johnny. I sound like a football referee. Well, I want to be one, but yeah. And then in here, for the Annie side, we've got her message, all with green on the right hand side for her, on the left hand side for Johnny. So that is really cool. I think a very tiny bit of thing that we forgot to do is add a margin left to where if it's not a current user, so that it shows this message as nicely laid out on the screen. That's it for today's tutorial. If you want to learn the basics of Blazor, I've put together a playlist right here where we'll build together a recipe manager, so make sure you check that out. I truly hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and it's been of value to you, and if it was, why not hit that like button to make sure that this video spreads out to as many people as possible. And I post weekly tutorials just like this one on Blazor and .NET in general, so if you like content like this, please subscribe and join our club. If you've got questions or suggestions of any type, please make sure that you leave them to the comment section below, and I'll make sure to respond to every single one of them. Until next time, stay safe.